This is Do It for a Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance. What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It for a Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now. So we have Jordan Watson here, the founder of National Speed in North Carolina. National Speed is a venture-backed speed shop that focuses on installation, dyno tuning, and retail parts sales. Jordan's got a pretty big, hairy, audacious goal. It's to be the first to create a national speed shop with locations across the country, so enthusiasts know that they have somewhere to go no matter where they live, that they will be treated fairly and consistently. So, Jordan, tell us how this all got started, and tell us your vision for the company.
Yeah, no problem. Well, Reed, first of all, thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be on here, especially with some of my industry heroes preceding me, like Shane Tecklenburg and Paul Young and all those guys. But anyway, just to start off, I was not the founder of National Speed. I actually started off as a foot-in-the-door position behind the sales counter. The company was founded by a gentleman named George Taylor back in 2007 with the original vision to create a scalable speed shop model that could be standardized to the point where it could scale. And obviously that was started up in 2007. And if you think back to what happened in 2008, it was a time of crisis. And at the time, we weren't exactly sure how that was going to affect the performance industry. So we went into a not necessarily defensive posture, but we paused for a bit just to see what would happen. And we watched the SEMA data just religiously, just trying to see how this was going to affect the economy, how this was going to affect the industry. And what was really interesting to note is while almost every single little niche marketplace was pointing straight down, everything, especially the luxury industry, failing, the performance industry, especially the street performance industry, kept going and kept growing. And it's grown every single year since 1999, even through.
And let me ask you something. Are you using data from SEMA to come up with those numbers?
Correct.
Or that perception?
Yeah. There's a report they put out annually that details part sales, anything you want to know about any niche industry. So whether you're looking at the street rodder or domestic or import, they break it all down so you can get a good feeler for how that niche industry is tracking. So we look at that every single year to make sure we're on track, and it's pretty impressive. If you haven't looked at it, go check it out.
Okay.
But anyway, after that point, so I started with the company in 2007. And it took us a few years of testing, figuring out process, figuring out what we need as a company in order to scale. And truth be told, we had no idea what we were doing in the beginning. And we started figuring it out. And in 2012, myself and George's son, George Taylor III, took over National Speed. Now, it was a very interesting time, and during that time, we figured out, we had to look at things differently, and we figured out exactly what we needed to do in order to make the business a scalable model, everything from the marketing to the sales process, all the way down to hiring strategy, and figure out how we get the places in, or the pieces in place so that we actually move as a company. So now we're at a point now where we have the right pieces in place, we have the right understanding, we have the right technology, we're ready to roll.
So you're the first one to focus on a speed shop from the business perspective. Do you think that's an advantage or a disadvantage?
Huge advantage. If you look at the speed shop industry, I mean, the first speed shops go back to the 1940s. And there's a speed shop in practically every city across America. And what's interesting to note is that the speed shop model hasn't changed, really hasn't since the 1940s. The only major change we've had is the accessibility of the internet. There has been no leader out there setting standards for this is the way it's done. You have SEMA, you have AAIA, you have the efforts like the PIEs and ACEs compliant databases that almost no parts manufacturers adhere to. And there are people trying to push it forward, but the industry won't allow it. So with us blending in these business skills with, clear passion, I believe that's the catalyst that will make it necessary. That's the catalyst that will make everyone step up. It'll set a standard. So I believe that our business skills and us approaching it from such a different way is a huge asset.
So your idea is to make it on service, not on part sales.
Correct.
In my experience, that's the most difficult and least scalable part of a speed shop. What do you think about that?
You couldn't be more right. It's extremely difficult. Part sales are much easier, of course, because you can sit down and you can put a parts database together if you take the time, and it's pretty easy to follow through with. What's incredibly difficult for us, and you're right, it is the least scalable part of this business, is the service side, especially calibration.
Right. How do you attract the right people, and especially if you're going to do this, in multiple different states and things like that? Well, how do you attract and keep talent?
Well, we approach hiring very different than any other shop I've ever talked to in this industry, or I guess really anyone in this industry. We approach it from a standpoint of personality and cohesion. We have a series of assessments that we put any candidate through to ensure that they have a good personality fit for the position we're hiring them for. That's a huge part of what we do, the right people in the right roles. And over the past few years, we've spent a lot of time figuring out what personality types work well in different roles. You're going to have a very different personality for a consultant as opposed to a general manager or a technician or a calibrator. It's all extremely different. And we spend a lot of time defining what each role, what the requirements are for each one. So for us, we're not so concerned about someone that has speed shop experience as a technician. We're not so concerned about their past of being able to do any type of performance installations. What we're looking for is personality, mindset, good baseline skills. If they got 80% of what we need, we can train the other 20%. And that goes for managers, that goes for consultants, that goes for technicians. And our team is a testament to that. In fact, the only person in our team that ever worked at a speed shop before is our general manager. All of our technicians, none of them have ever worked in a speed shop before. We brought them on and we trained them with their good baseline skill set. They found success quickly. So with that same model and carrying that out, it's not that difficult once you figure out what these people need to know and you support them properly with technology.
So tell us about the roles in your company. What does a consultant do?
Well, the performance consultant, his only role is to manage inquiries and walk the customer through the process of figuring out exactly what they need. It's more of assisted buying. It's not really selling. So he'll take phone calls, walk-ins, emails, social media inquiries, and it's his responsibility to provide the work for the shop to complete. And from there, we obviously have technicians on site to perform the installation, the fabrication, and 80% of our projects require calibration after the work's completed. So we have an in-house full-time calibrator as well. And then we have some operational staff to keep things rolling for purchasing, parts kitting, things like that. And obviously we have a general manager to keep everything moving in the right direction.
Gotcha. So it's the performance consultant's job basically just to interact with people, handle their inquiries when they ask about how much is it going to cost to do this or how's this process going to work. It's his job basically just to explain that situation, and then when it's time to schedule an appointment, he's going to hand it off to a salesperson and get that appointment scheduled or whatever.
Correct. It's his job to assess the need and figure out what needs to be done in order to make that dream happen. And it's also his responsibility to plan the job properly. A lot of speed shops, they'll bring someone in with line item 1, labor, line item 2, turbo kit, and they just kind of figure it out as they go. That ends up with issues because you can't schedule around that. You end up pissing the customer off because it takes longer than expected. It ends up costing much more than expected. So we take the time up front to quote accurately. So we know if we have a 2010 Camaro coming in for a cam job, we are going to need these 28 components in order to do it. And that way we can get it down to as close to the bottom dollar as possible. So the customer knows exactly what to expect. We know exactly how to plan the job on the schedule, and we ensure that we've got all the parts up front.
So it's a really interesting thing that you guys are doing because to take the time to create all these estimates, there's got to be only a small percentage of them that actually come through with inquiry after inquiry after inquiry, especially with the guy down the street who is going to just say, oh, cam install, that's 10 hours. Cam's like, $300. He's not going to go to the time to maybe say, all right, well, that cam installation also requires valve springs, stem seals, retainers, etc., and you guys are. So his estimate's going to be $1,500, and your estimate's going to be $2,500.
It's easy.
And your estimate is, it's going to take your guy a couple of hours. So how do you explain that situation and how you handle the guy down the street who's just doing it off the cuff?
Well, what's good is that our process inspires confidence, and people see the amount of work that goes into making sure that they're going to be happy at the end of it. 80% of the time, they can't imagine going anywhere else, and I challenge them. I say, just so you know, this shop down the street, they are going to be cheaper. Here's why. They are less granular. They more than likely do not stand behind their work. If we break it, man, we fix it. So if something goes wrong with this, even a month later, and it's related to our work, we're going to take care of it entirely. Because we're able to do that. And I challenge them. I say, here's the quote. Go get another quote. Go get a shop tour at this other shop. Who are you more confident with? And every time I challenge someone to that, they come back and say, man, you guys are the shop. And as long as you can justify it, as long as you can help them feel confident that the extra amount is actually worth it, that's all you have to do. It's all about trust.
So in that situation, I'm just processing all the things that you said right now. In the situation where the guy down the street is not as confidence inspiring, and you guys are building your brand on, a real accurate quote up front, and your price, like you're not building your brand on the cheapest price. So does that mean that certain customers don't fit your bill?
Well, it kind of weeds itself out, but we're a firm believer that whenever you build your business on price, it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah, it's a race to zero. I call it a race to zero all the time. Yeah. Why are we racing to zero?
I want to race to the top. I want good competition out there. I want people to be able to charge fairly for what they do and not slash rates in order just to get the business. And what's good is when you hold yourself to that standard, when you hold yourself to being higher than that, you attract the right people. We are not a cut rate shop. We are not going to do the cam install on the F-body for $500. We just don't do it because the model doesn't work. So that's the way it works.
So where do you get your installation labor times?
Well, we utilize some of the OE style systems like AllData, but we have our own database built for what we charge for any type of installation.
So you've created a flat rate price sheet?
Not even that. It's more of a searchable database. So for a technician that's never done a downpipe on an Evo before, we have that categorized with notes so that they understand why it's a 4-hour install whenever the book time is 1.6. Oh, these 3 bolts are going to break whenever we separate the downpipe from the turbine housing? Got it. Okay. So we've built our own database for installation times in a performance world. And also little tricks that we do to cut down on book time. So prime example, if you're doing a cam install on a Corvette, the book calls to pull the heads. It calls for about 24 hours. We can do it in 12 or do it in 14, depending on what model. And we have all those little tricks laid out in order to make our technicians more efficient so that they can meet their time and also give a better value to the customer. So we've done that with our performance installations, but also our calibrations. We have base maps created and saved from experience with all these different models we work with, everything from GM, Ford, Mitsubishi, Subaru, Nissan, etc., as well as with parts database. I spent a solid 6 months doing nothing, 12 to 16 hours a day, creating my own Pies Aces compliant database that we use internally for the cars that we work with commonly. And this way, this cuts down on quoting time. This allows us to generate a quote quickly for the cars that we work with commonly. It allows our technicians to understand what realistic time it's going to take, and it allows us to cut down on tuning time, thus giving a better value for the customer and basically streamlining everything we do. So
talk to me about your technicians and how you pay and motivate your technicians, and that their pay is in alignment with, who you guys are. I don't believe that bonuses work or at least hourly work in the performance industry, because it drives the tech to hurry instead of spend their time.
Right.
Performance work is not like general automotive repair, because nothing fits. Everything's got to be custom, and because of that, the installers need to be able to think on their feet. They're going to have to make 100 decisions in the course of an install.
Absolutely.
And if they're only getting paid for an 8-hour install, their alignment is not with quality work. It's with meeting the deadline.
Sure.
So what's your view on that?
Our view on it's pretty unconventional, and in fact, it raises eyebrows every time I tell people. Every position at this company is salary. We don't believe
I actually agree with that 110%.
Yeah, we don't believe in flat rate in this industry. And the reason is that we drive our guys, we drive their decision making with consistent vision. And whenever you put their pay on the line and they have to make the decision between making, the 10-hour job that we have sold, cutting a corner, or making a decision in the best interest of the customer, I want them to be able to make the best decision for the customer and not have their pay affected. If they go over on time, shouldn't be on them. That being said, we are absolutely fanatical about metrics and tracking workflow. So everyone has very clear goals. They understand exactly what's expected of them, and they know if they're behind, if they're green or they're red. We do not tolerate C players. If you aren't an A player, you're gone. And with that amount of visibility and the context as to why we do it this way, our guys hit.
How do you track metrics?
Well, we track it, again, we have a system built around it. But basically think about, you have 8 hours of opportunity a day. How productive were you? And we track the progress against the billable time on the job, and we know when the runway ends. So we do that daily for, all of our marketing data, our sales data, our technicians, everything, even purchasing efficiency.
Who's in charge of tracking the metrics?
The general manager.
So he has the uncomfortable conversations, or do you try to handle it before it becomes an uncomfortable conversation, just saying, hey, you guys are going orange?
Pretty much, yeah. So we're all about supporting. We don't like to be threatening or anything like that. So everyone knows it's very public. We have weekly pivot meetings where we discuss the performance in the shop the last week, and you start seeing someone that's consistently just making their numbers or missing. I mean, it becomes a conversation. And we don't have a whole lot of negative emotion in the shop. We speak very openly and very honestly, and we all trust each other. So we're all very well aware of what's going on, and that comes down to stating a culture and adhering to it. If you have something to hold each other accountable to, not only performance, but also how you act, everyone's on the same page, and you can trust what they're saying is true, and you can trust that they only want what's best for the company, the customer, and the team.
So I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. How did you get into where you are right now?
Oh, man, that's a hell of a story. I've been into cars ever since I was in diapers, man. Every single baby picture of me, I got a car in my hand. And in fact, my favorite activity when I was a kid, I would pull the newspaper off the counter, and I would find the car ads, and I would sit there for hours and just point at cars and just make noises. So I guess fundamentally not much has changed, but but I was basically born with wheels. Anything mechanical, electrical, or if it has wheels, I was always enamored by it. But my parents did everything they could to keep me out of cars, and I didn't understand why until I was a little bit older. But so ever since middle school, I was playing Gran Turismo 1, and that's all I did. Into high school, obviously, that carried on. And I always had this natural curiosity where if I didn't know, I wanted to know. If I saw a car that I didn't know anything about, I would spend hours, days, months researching it to get to know it as well as I possibly could, just because I was just blown away by it. It was just the coolest thing in the planet to me. And so through high school, obviously, with the ability to buy a car, get a license, actually start doing some of this, it kind of intensified. I started mowing lawns when I was 10 or 12 years old to buy my first car, and I had it in my mind. I wanted a Z32 300ZX. So I mowed lawns. I did whatever I could to scrape together whatever cash I possibly could, and I did it. When I was 15, found the one on Auto Trader I could afford. I even had enough money to ship it up from Hollywood, California. Hell, dude, I still remember the VIN number from that car. It's a JN1RZ24A3LX000102. That's how much I love it. And I got it, and it was the best day of my life, dude. I had my Z32, and I was 15, so I didn't have my permit or nothing, so I would just drive it around the neighborhood. And on day 2, I found out what it sounds like when a BG30DE engine breaks a timing belt, and every single valve contacts the pistons.
Not a good day.
Not a good day at all. So there I was. I had no tools. Spent every dollar I had on this car. It was broken. And I had to learn quickly. I had no mechanical inclination at all. I had no idea even what happened. And at the time, it sucked. At the time, it was the worst thing on the planet to me. But when I look back now, that was the most valuable thing that ever happened to me, because what that did is that forced me to step up, forced me to educate myself. And once I started educating myself, that's when it started clicking over. And I was like, holy shit, I just want to know everything. So I educated myself on engine dynamics. I educated myself on what even went wrong, anything I could do to learn about that car. And then I started figuring out what tools I needed. I started borrowing them from neighbors, and I tore in. And it took me 2 months just to get the cylinder heads off. And whenever I lifted the head up and looked, everything was aluminum foil. I dropped it back down, put everything in the trunk, and called it quits.
Like valves poked holes in the piston.
Yeah,
it was game over.
It was done. It was done. There was no way I could fix it. And so I started thinking. I was like, all right. I mean, is this it for me? Do I really care that much about these cars? And within 20 seconds, I answered to myself, hell yeah. So I put the car up for sale, and I was actually able to break even on it. Could not believe it. I broke even, sold it to a kid in South Carolina, and from there I was like, all right, I need to figure out a way to do this cheaper. So naturally I got into Hondas, and my first running car actually was a 1994 Honda Civic EX. And man, from there it was kind of a blurry few years. It was just learning so much about performance cars and racing and experimenting with anything we could get our hands on. So my little group of friends, we would build these cars in our backyard with shoestring budget. I'm talking $2 or $3 grand total cost. So we would make whatever we needed. We would barter. We would find used parts. We would get deals on eBay, whatever we could do to build these cars. And they were primarily Hondas and GSMs, so we were able to go pretty fast for pretty cheap. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of late nights from age 17 to 19 or so out street racing, doing things that we shouldn't be doing. Well, what was cool is that was my college. That was my education from about 2003 to 2009. I learned everything I needed to know in order to get started. I learned about who to trust. I learned about how to sell. I learned about the importance of culture with my group of friends, and I learned a lot technically. And it was all very applicable to what I do now. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it was the most important era of my life. So I stayed in it. And all the while I'm getting hell from everyone in my life that cares about me. I'm a CD student in school. I just don't care. None of this relates to me. Anything that had to do with math or chemistry or anything like that, I killed. I did great. But, history, well, yeah, the War of 1812, it's interesting. I just don't care. It has nothing to do with cars. So
you don't have a college education?
No, I do not. I almost failed out of high school, actually. And everyone was very concerned about me because I clearly wasn't going to college. Everyone thought I was unmotivated, but the truth was I hadn't found what motivated me yet. And it was very clear to me. I love cars, and frankly, I said this to my parents one time. I said, I don't care if I end up changing oil as long as it has to do with performance cars. I'm happy. And they didn't understand it. And it's not their fault. I mean, I'd be concerned as well. But just give you an idea how deep my passion ran at this time. My parents wouldn't allow me to have a TV in my room. rightfully so. But so what I did is I found a 12-inch black and white TV in the attic. I hid it under my dirty laundry under my desk, and I had a cable jack in my room, so I had to hook it up with speaker wire. And it was a little like black and white 12-inch TV from the 80s, and I was able to get some blurry channels. And at the time, it was Speed Vision. It wasn't Speed Channel. And every night they played the World Rally Championships. So I would be up, early hours of the morning, on my belly on the carpet, staring at this little black and white fuzzy monitor, watching, Marcus Grönholm and Petter Solberg, flying around Finland or whatever it is, with the volume just in between like 0 and 1, so I could just barely hear it. And that was the coolest thing on the planet to me, just dreaming about, building a rally car and the Peugeot 206s and the STIs. And to me, again, it was just unparalleled. There was nothing this cool on the planet. This is all I cared about. So it was 24/7. That's all I did. I was on forums reading. I was researching. I was talking to people. I was making relationships. I was networking. It was just what I was on this planet to do, and I knew it at such a young age. And everyone was really concerned about that because no one saw a future for it. I had my brother tell me one time, said, dude, you are on a path to be a loser. No one cares. There's no career in this for you. You need to get your shit straight, go to college, do something that you can actually make a living with. And again, it was all very good advice at the time, but I just didn't believe it. I didn't care. And then it finally got to the point where I had to tell everyone, I said, you need to trust me. It's going to work out one way or another. You need to trust me. As much as I care. Go ahead.
I feel like there's a common thread in people in the performance industry, myself included, other tuners. Yeah, I mean, really there's something that is hard to talk about. It's hard to explain to other people, but it's the difference between motivation and not motivation. If you're motivated to do it and you're hungry enough and you're passionate enough, then you're going to go and figure it out. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that just enjoy cars and aren't willing to work.
Right. And that's the biggest thing that we face. But, when you have that conviction, when you know that whole, this is why I'm here. I mean, dude, for that being so rare in people, whenever you acknowledge it, whenever you know that feeling, you're a coward if you don't acknowledge it. Or a fool. You just don't recognize it. But, I was blessed from the perspective that I had that conviction at a very young age. And it was so difficult to explain. But I knew that if I stayed in it, as passionate as I was about it, something would happen. I just had to keep talking. I had to keep moving. I had to keep educating myself. I had to stay alive in it. And, that was very concerning for everyone in my life. They didn't see it at the time. And that's part of what drives me crazy about this industry is even still, whenever I tell people what I do, they go, oh, okay. Because they're picturing, these like messy speed shops with, dismantled cars out front, just circling the building, just run down, shady practices. And that's the perception I'm out to change. But anyway, leading into what got me involved in National Speed, I kind of stood out in the local community here just from my passion and how driven I was. And whenever National Speed was starting to get assembled by George Taylor, the original founder, he touched base with me and said, hey, I'm not sure how you fit in, if you fit in at all, but your name keeps coming up. I want to talk. So my first interview with him was actually in his living room, and we talked mostly about, what do you want out of life, dude? And I told him, I said, I want to do something big. I don't know what it is yet. I haven't figured that out, but it's got to be with performance cars, and I'm happy.
Tell me about the caliber of person that George Taylor was.
George Taylor's a machine. He's still one of the most intelligent, business savvy, and my guy, I just can't say enough about him. He could take any idea and make it something huge, and he's done it time and time again. He had multiple tech startups prior to National Speed that, a couple were sold privately, a couple were still traded publicly today. The man's just a machine, and you talk to him and you would never guess it. He wears torn jeans, button up that he pulled out of the bottom of the hamper, sandals, and he talks in a very disarming way. that you would never guess that this man is capable of what he's capable of. And, I instantly realized the first time I met him, like, oh, no, you're going to help me. you're going to help me get to where I want to be. And what's great about George is that he's willing to do that for those that are willing to do the work. So he, whenever I was hired almost a year later, and I think I interviewed him there in his living room in like 2006. I went into it, just blown away that I finally had my dream job. There wasn't much definition around it yet because the company was so new, but I knew I was going to be doing something with sales, which is part of my background. And I was going to have to do with performance cars. It's in this, amazing, beautiful shop, and man, we're going to take over the world and life's going to be great. And it was. And what I learned quickly was how hard I was going to be pushed. So for the first 6 months of that job, I was convinced every single day I was going to get fired just because I was messing up so bad. And I kept trying. And then, one day it finally clicked. And I started doing very well in the job. I started doing very well in the company.
Messing up by whose standards? And explain to me what messing up means.
Messing up in the sense of, not getting back to people, not being organized.
And who's tracking you and keeping you on track for that?
But at the time, it was the manager of the shop. And at that time, we didn't really have a great system in place. We didn't have very clearly defined metrics. Again, we had no idea what we were doing in the early stages of the company. But I'm extremely hard on myself. If I don't feel like I did it as best as I could and I wasn't effective and I let anyone down at all, that's a big deal for me. So I was consistently beating myself up, and I found out the reality of the situation years later was I was the only one that was upset with my performance. But so through that, I pushed and I figured out the organization system. I figured out how I need to conduct myself. And also, I come from a background where, emotions ruled because car guys are not the most logical guys all the time. And that was not tolerated at national speed. I'd lose my temper and I'd, grumble. And I got pulled aside the first month. And George sat me down and said, look, dude, I'm not sure how you operate outside of this business. I'm not sure how you've operated up to this point, but this will stop right now. You conduct yourself professionally. You do not slip. And if you do it again, your ass is fired. So, got it, man. And
Pretty clear.
Well, I never worked in a professional environment before. I was washing dishes up to this point, And I didn't understand that, oh, no, this is how you're supposed to act. So I started paying attention to, people that were successful in business in Wilmington. And I started talking with them. I started building relationships with them. And I started doing the exact same thing I had done years prior. There was a deficit in where I wanted to be. I'm going to talk to people, read. I'm going to do whatever I can to fill that.
So you had mentioned that you had mentors, that you have mentors and advisors. Who are these people, and how much are they influencing your day-to-day decisions?
They're not influencing my day-to-day decisions very much. I come to them with strategic issues that I can't solve by myself, or I just need to bounce it off. But over the years, I've surrounded myself with people that specialize in marketing, operations, just general business strategy, and technical as well. Just the ability to pick up the phone and say, hey, I've worked through this as best I can. This is what I'm coming up with. Is there anything I'm missing? And have them say, yeah, well, have you considered these 3 things? Thank you. And then get back to it. I'm huge on being able to solve my own issues and only reaching out to my mentors and advisors when I really need it. But they were instrumental in my early career development and getting me where I need to be. And I'm to the point now, and have been for the past couple of years, where I'm generally self-sufficient. I come to them with bigger issues.
So you talked about your background. You talked about how you got started with National Speed and what National Speed is all about. Now, tell us what the goal is for National Speed 5 years from now. Is it a revenue goal? Is it a number of stores? Talk to us about that. Like, how big is this dream?
It's pretty big. In 5 years, our 5-year vision is to have 40 locations scaled nationwide. And that always sounds
40?
That sounds very aggressive to everyone, but hear me out here. Once we get the process down for opening a second store, a third store, fourth store, you hone it down to the point where you understand the process and you can span them out in parallel. So locations 1 to 5, I'm sure, are going to take a big chunk of that time. But once we get to that tipping point where, one, we have relevance in the community, we don't have to go shaking trees for 8 players anymore. And two, we got the process down. It's as simple as getting the resources in place and running it out.
Scaling the performance business from a service and installation standpoint, I'm going to be glued to the screen.
Well, pay attention. This year is going to be especially interesting. We're opening our second location at the end of this year.
Where's the second location?
Richmond, Virginia.
And is the ultimate goal to move west?
Well, the ultimate goal right now is to stay in the Southeast. But here's the thing. A lot of people ask, how do you pick what cities you're going to go after? And early on, I talked to a couple firms that do franchising and do marketplace selection and all that stuff. And I was asking them, like, what would you suggest? If we were to hire you to help us scale out the business, what would you do differently than whatever I could do? And they all talked about demographics, this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, yeah, but none of that shit matters to me. All I care about is what percentage of you are car people. I don't necessarily care if we have a marketplace of 1.2 million people with a median household income of $250,000 a year if it's no resemblance of a car culture. Doesn't do anything for me. So you're looking for a place that already has a car culture, not to create one. Hell yeah. So what I did is I just took the reins myself. All that data is available. So I went and looked at every major marketplace across America, and I pulled all the data that I care about. Everything from population count, and went ahead and, I hate to say it, but pulled out all the female population because 99.99% repeated of our customer base is male. And then I drilled down further into disposable income by age range. I looked at the average car per household count, and I got really granular with it. And I was able to work from our historic data of what we were able to see revenue-wise with our current customer base. And I had some data that I could plug into all these other marketplaces across America. And I built one big, complicated-looking spreadsheet, but it made it real simple. What kind of business could we recognize in this marketplace? But also, I got into the psychographics. Is there a cars and coffee event? Monthly, bi-weekly, whatever it may be. Is there a racetrack nearby? What kind? Is it a dirt track? Don't really care. Is it a road course? Now we're talking. Drag strip? Awesome. And really drill down into some of these deeper psychographics, and then put it all into one calculation, and it spit out 52 marketplaces with our current understanding that we would be able to get into and find success in. Because consider this, where we're at right now, Wilmington, North Carolina, here's some interesting key metrics. Our total metropolitan statistical area is only 330,000 people. Our city is just over 100,000 people. The median household income, taking into account the poverty line, the very wealthy, whatever, it's about $28,000 a year. And we operate with a standing 3 to 4 month backlog with 3 technicians, a few weeks out on the dyno, basically making record sales every single month to the point where we're having a hard time containing it inside our 8,600 square foot facility. And that's what we have to work with. So now you take that standard, you take what we've been able to do in this marketplace, which is a very poor marketplace, it was an excellent one to test it, and you apply that to Richmond, that has 3 times the population, an even better population as far as metrics are concerned, and consider that you have 1 mile radiuses in Henrico County there where you have over 100,000 people, so more people than we have in our city, with a median household income of over $100,000 a year and an average car count of 2.5. And the psychographic data is there as well. You have a stable marketplace, you have an opportune marketplace, you have a huge car culture. There we go. So you look for those marketplaces across America, you standardize it to the point where we can easily set up shop and become profitable, and do it consistently, give good service, give people what they expect, do it consistently, and do that across America, and there we go.
So on paper, it makes sense.
Right. Practical application.
Now, practical application, execution, that's the hard part. I'm really curious to see how you're going to do that. Now, when you're doing this thing and you're out pinging people and you're talking to people in the industry about this concept, like you said, you're talking to people on a daily basis. You're interacting with the community all the time. How do you deal with the devil on your shoulder telling you that things can't be done? Because I have to believe that when you're talking to other people in the industry, because this is such a revolutionary idea, you've got to be getting a lot of kickback.
Oh, a ton. But at the end of the day, that I know that it can make sense. I know that it can work. I understand the risks. I understand what's going to hold us back, and I understand what hurdles we're going to have to overcome. It's a very fluid thing we're trying to do. You're talking about something that's very near and dear to people's hearts. This isn't Walmart. This isn't.
This is people's lives.
Right.
People live and breathe and eat cars.
Exactly.
Like, it's who they are. It's their identity.
And you have to treat that with a certain level of respect. And you can't view it as just provide the product and people will come. You have to make sure that you stay emotional. You have to make sure that you get people that live it, that have the grit and understand why these people are doing it. Otherwise, it will fail. And that's something to consider. But also, there are several hurdles we'll have to overcome. And given as much thought as I possibly can to them right now, I've got good answers for every single issue that we will face. But here's the thing. Truth be told, whenever you get to the execution side of things, you are always wrong. Your plan.
So, Jordan, you didn't answer my question about how do you deal with the devil on your shoulder telling you it can't be done?
You ignore it. You acknowledge the issues. You understand them as best you can. You acknowledge you don't know everything. You acknowledge that the plan's going to be wrong and its only purpose is to get you moving. And you have confidence and faith in yourself and your team that you'll be able to face whatever comes your way.
So when other people are telling you that this thing's not going to work, that doesn't bother you.
Oh, no.
You don't doubt yourself.
Oh, not at all. You're talking to a guy that's been told he's wrong his entire life. I'm impervious to it at this point.
Hey, you're going to get hit 10,000 times, right? You're here to get hit.
Exactly. It's not a matter of how strong you are. It's a matter of how quickly and intensely you get up. And I've been knocked on my ass thousands of times. You just have to keep getting up, acknowledge that you're bloody, acknowledge it's going to hurt, keep fighting, and one day it works.
So I want to ask you a couple of specific questions. First of all, do you try and do everything yourself?
Oh, God, no. God, no. We assemble our team very strategically. One, make the positions realistic for an individual to complete. But also I acknowledge that my strengths are very strong. My weaknesses are very weak. And I make sure that I surround myself with those that offset my weaknesses.
So it seems like you're very logical and not as pride-driven.
Oh, not at all.
Say that's a fair drill?
Yeah, I've got actually very, very little pride and ego. My only goal is to see the company move and to realize the vision. Whether that's with me in one position or another, I don't care. I want to go where I'm best served, or excuse me, where best served as a company. And I want to build a badass team of 8 players that can do it with me. I want this to be, a very, very team-oriented thing. I'm just a component within that.
Right. So, Jordan, what are you not good at? What's your Achilles heel?
I suck at operations.
Meaning day-to-day?
Oh, no. I suck at anything that has to do with any type of process or process implementation, documentation, anything like that. Thankfully,
working within a system. I can't work within a system, but I'm moderately good at building a system.
I'm a gunslinger, man. I'm all about finding the result, but I know what the process should be. So I'm good at creating my own system. I suck at working within one.
I'm right there with you, brother.
Yeah. So all I could say to people is, this is how I found success. Here's what my process is. We can make this work doing this, but I'm probably not going to follow it.
I swear I've had that exact same conversation with my employees.
Exactly. It's that entrepreneurial spirit within me. But what's good is that I acknowledge that process is almost everything of what we do. So I respect it. It's just not natural and within me. And thankfully, my general manager, Adam Kennedy, is extremely process-driven. And he helps to offset a lot of my Achilles heel in that regard.
Well said. Why do you think that you've been successful when other people haven't?
People quit. They're weak. People don't believe in what they're doing. They're easily shoved off it, and they give up way too easily. The most successful people have a vision. They have grit. They don't quit. If you believe in what you're doing, you believe this is why you're on this planet, and you are badass enough to get knocked on your ass consistently and constantly, and to be able to get up and keep fighting, you will be successful. May not be done in the time that you wanted, but you'll find it eventually.
So what happens if your 5-year plan turns into a 10-year plan?
It probably will. I'm good with that. As long as we're moving, that's all I care about.
You're in it.
I care about the ball moving forward, whether that's a yard at a time or, hell, we just hit a touchdown. I don't care. As long as we're moving forward and we assess new information, we learn from failures, we don't make the same ones, that's what's important to me. What pisses me off more than anything is stalling. And there's a difference between stalling and working forward in a backwards motion. Sometimes you have to go back and say, we were wrong, we got to rework this. That's a sense of moving forward, even though if you look at it in a granular way, it feels like it's moving backwards. But if you look at it from 10,000 feet down, you're like, no, dude, you were doing the right thing. And that's what's important is you have to look at what's true. And as long as you're moving forward, that's all that matters. Your plan's going to be wrong. People got to get okay with that. It is not going to go as you envision. That's why the saying is an entrepreneur doesn't have a plan, they have a vision. If you follow the vision, if everything's clicking off in the right direction, that's all you have to worry about.
So, Jordan, give us some resources that you're using. Do you listen to audiobooks, podcasts, or read books on the regular?
I read.
And if so, can you give us some resources or some books that are valuable, that you found valuable?
Well, I read all the time. One I'm reading right now that I'm thoroughly in love with is called The Hard Thing About the Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. And for any budding entrepreneur, anyone that's facing difficulty in business, because if you're doing something new, it's difficult. It's worth reading because there's a lot of great nuggets in there. But and something that I would encourage anyone that's trying to grow to do is that if you know you have a deficit in your ability, your skill, your knowledge, understanding of a certain area that's essential and important, constantly educate yourself.
There's so much information out there right now. It drives me crazy when I talk to people about reading a book and they're like, oh, are they still making those things? And right. I'm like, oh, no. You guys are killing me.
Yeah. Yes.
So I like to hear that you're constantly out there educating yourself. I feel like that's the difference between the people that are going to go out and make waves and the people who are going to ride the wave.
Right. Right.
So tell us about a game-changing product that you've seen in the last year and what makes it a game changer.
Well, to me, I'm looking at this in a very street performance way, not necessarily race products. There's a ton of awesome race products that have come online in the last year or so. But the most exciting development for me, it's not a new product, but it's a developed one, is what's happening with HP tuners right now. In the past, whenever we had to tune a Dodge, we had to do Diablo Sport. Whenever we did a Ford, we had to do SCT. And I've always dreamed of one system stepping up and ruling an entire marketplace. And it's been awesome to see HP Tuner stepping up and getting into the Ford market, getting into the Dodge market. And I mean, frankly, that's what we're tuning with primarily for all of our domestic vehicles now. And that's very exciting to me because we're giving a consistent, high quality product for less cost to our customers. It makes it more attainable for them, makes it easier to provide for us. And frankly,
yeah, it's easier to not have to navigate 3 different software programs.
Exactly that, and also you learn the system better every time you use it, and it's also cheaper. I mean, the fact that we can tune any domestic vehicle, practically any domestic vehicle right now for $100 credit, I mean, God.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So that's the most exciting thing that I've seen come online this year. And we're reveling in it. Every domestic vehicle that's coming in right now is tagged on our Facebook page, tuned by HP Tuners.
Nice. So what software program are you using on a daily basis?
For what purpose?
For anything. What's your most useful software program? This could be Excel. If you're an engineer, this could be SolidWorks. This could even be just Google Calendar. Like, what do you find yourself immersed in on the daily?
Well, we have a system that we've built ourselves for operation, for point of sales, where these databases are held, all that. So that's my good.
Do you have a software engineer that does that?
No, we work with an off-site firm out of Colorado. But that's basically what I live and die by. So that's all my metrics. That's all my reporting. That's where I can drill down into whatever I need to know about the performance of the shop, and get a feeler for how we're tracking. But also, Excel is one of my favorite programs because I'm a data whore. I love looking at data in different ways. I love looking for hidden correlations. And a lot of times I'm a visual thinker. So I'll put all this data that may seem, completely unrelated into a spreadsheet and look at it in graph form, and I go, oh my God, look at that. And you'll find correlations that you normally wouldn't even acknowledge or even think of. looking at it in a visual way. So I look at whatever data I possibly can and try to figure out some hidden correlations so I understand a new knob I can turn, so to speak.
The number one software resource is Excel. Everybody says Excel. I think the common thread in our industry is that we're all data horse. Whether the data is business metrics or graphical analysis of anything, engine data, fuel injector data, I mean, it's all graphical, and it's all data mineable in Excel.
Right.
How about a mobile app? Is there anything beyond Dunkin' Donuts that you use on your mobile app?
Not really, man. Not really. Aside from I love red wine, so I use an application called NextGlass, which what they've done is they've fed every bottle of wine of every vintage and craft beer through a liquid chromatography mass spectrometer and broke it down to data so that it's objective-driven recommendations within this application, as opposed to subjective terms.
Subjective, right. So do you follow Gary Vaynerchuk, Wine Library TV?
I do not know. Okay. Yeah, I'm not a wine snob or anything like that. I just like knowing that this $19 bottle of wine I'm about to buy is actually in line with what I value in wine and my taste buds like. That's why I use the app.
Crazy. What's your favorite shop tool, Jordan?
Definitely our dyno. if that at all applies to that, but our dyno is by far my favorite shop tool.
What kind of dyno do you have?
It's a DynoJet 424 XLC2.
Right on. So, what's the future of automotive performance?
Well, the future of automotive performance is, one, it needs to be standardized. And that's what we're out to do. But I think...
What needs to be standardized? Get specific on...
Experience, mostly. You look at speed shops, and there are very good speed shops, there are very bad speed shops, and then you have speed shops that are kind of in the middle there. And right now, do
you mean with some sort of ASE type certification or ASA?
Oh, I'm sorry. No. So think about it like this. Let me give the most cogent example I can. Now think about the hardware industry before Home Depot. You had hardware stores in every city across America, and each one of them kind of operated in their own way, and whether it was really good or really bad, but there was no expected standard for the customer. So when they walked in the door, they didn't really have an expectation of what they should be experiencing, and it could be a poor experience, and they go, oh, okay, that's just the way this is. Well, Home Depot, what they did is they didn't just build a massive franchise. What they did is they set a standard. Because of what they did, you walk into a hardware store expecting a certain experience, whether that's product in stock or expert advice, whatever it may be, whatever has made them successful. And because of that, that's forced all the other hardware stores to either step up to that level, figure out a way to stay competitive, or step on.
That's really hits home for me, because when I was growing up, we had an Ernst hardware, and my dad was always like, oh, we're going to go to Ernst and get some stuff. And it was, just a normal hardware store. I just thought a hardware store was a hardware store. And then we got, an Eagle hardware, and then we got Lowe's and Home Depot. And now when I go out to a different town and I need to pick something up, I know that I can go to Home Depot. I know the brands that they're going to carry. I know the store layout, etc. So
there it is.
That's kind of interesting that you say that, because when you put it in that term, then it makes sense.
Well, yeah, that's what's important to note here is you look at what Home Depot did, Meineke, Best Buy. What they did is they identified a very fragmented and leaderless marketplace that needed to be basically needed to grow up. And there was no one setting a standard. There was no leader. There was no one that was pushing all of this stuff on a national level. And because of what they did, it changed that industry, and it forced a new standard. And that's what I believe needs to happen in the automotive performance marketplace on a very, very, very broad scale and in a very big way. That's what needs to happen. That's the future.
Huh. So much to think about. Jordan, what's the future for you and your company?
Well,
we've already talked about that a little bit. But.
Right. Well, when National Speed's vision is achieved, the way I view it is, my job will be done. That's what I'm in for. I'm in for the impact. So after that happens, I will always be involved with National Speed in some regard. But frankly, the future for me is just playing with a lot of cars. After National Speed's vision's achieved, who knows how far it could expand. It can continue on to hundreds of locations. It could continue on to international locations. The sky's the limit. There's nothing that we can't do. It's just a matter of time.
So one book that comes to mind right now when you're saying that is Onward from Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks. Did you read that book? I
have not, but I've heard good things about it.
Really interesting concept. I mean, here's a guy that's, multi-billionaire type situation, just, at the highest kind of level, created this company from, meager beginnings, and then, grew it into what it was. And then during this downturn, really didn't need to do it for any monetary purposes, but dove right back in, took the reins over, and re-injected himself, was working crazy hours, all kinds of red light flights all over the world to make this business come back, and he did it. And it's just really, really inspiring kind of shit, because here's these guys that are so well off, they really don't need to do it for money, and it just goes to show that it's not about the dollar, it's about what you're trying to build. You're trying to build and leave a legacy and change how things work for the better.
That's what I was going to say, is that if you're in whatever you're doing for the money in a big way, you will fail. Money is not enough. If you can't personally identify with what it is you're doing and get off on the deeper reason, you will fail. And the reason that I want to achieve National Speed's vision isn't for money. It's the last damn thing on my mind. What it is that I love the idea of being able to interact with people. I love the idea of being able to interact with people that I care most about, gearheads. And like you said, help their dreams come true. We're working with these people's babies, And the fact that we're able to do that and do it consistently, make a good living doing it, and make a lot of people happy, I want that nationwide. That's why I'm in it. I want to be able to look back and say, look at how many people we impacted positively. Because of what we did, they expect more. And what's awesome is that with what we're doing, we'll create gearheads. Because right now, if you walk into a speed shop, that doesn't make it easy. It's intimidating. If you have a brand new Z06 and you walk into a speed shop and you don't know what you're asking for, you're nervous. And especially if you have some old baggage there from being taken advantage of or whatever it may be. But if you walk into a place that is proven to make it simple and to give you what you're paying for and to make it consistent, you're essentially taking these guys that are curious about performance and you're making them gearheads. And most of our customers, Reed, are not the performance-informed gearhead. They're not the guys out there on the track every weekend. They roll into the parking lot with a brand new Corvette and say, so I heard that, you can get more power out of these things. I don't really know much about it, though. And by the time we're done over the next year or so, after several different trips, they have a supercharger on it, long tube headers, exhaust, a cam, cylinder head, and they love it. And they're gearheads for life, even though they discovered it when they're 55 years old. And that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about, one, taking care of current gearheads, and two, creating an entirely new breed.
You're definitely onto something here, because I came into this concept with a chip on my shoulder and I didn't think it was going to work. And through this conversation, I'm more convinced than I was an hour ago. So kudos,
that's good,
my friend. I'm impressed. So you're going to make the sandbox bigger.
Oh, yeah, much bigger.
That's the idea.
That's
okay,
it.
So Jordan, I've really appreciated, Jordan, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Good stuff. We're going to have to revisit it. I'm going to have to touch base with you a year from now and see how it's going.
Yeah, definitely, dude. We'll definitely keep you posted.
How do we connect with you and your company?
The best way to find us is go track us down on Facebook. It's just National Speed. If you want to connect with me, I'm all out there. Just find me, Jordan Watson on Facebook, public profile. You can just add me. So we're very accessible.
And what's the website?
www.nationalspeedinc.com.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. We'll touch base again in the future and see how it's going.
Reed, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website, doitforaliving.net. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving. and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now. Seriously. I'll wait while you grab your phone. Open up the podcast app. Tap the subscribe button. When you